So, welcome everyone to the launch of the book Smarter Investments in Transport Infrastructure, published by the European Liberal Forum in cooperation with Fores in Sweden and Studiecentrum Albert Mertens in Belgium. My name is Andreas Bergström, and I am the editor of the book, and I'm the deputy director here at Fores. You can find the book on the European Liberal Forum homepage, liberalforum.org, and on the Fores homepage, fores.se. This is an European Liberal Forum seminar officially, so if you comment on Twitter, etc., please use the hashtag #ELF-event. We write that as well in the comments on YouTube. So with us today, we have two of the authors of the book and two great commenters. I'm very happy to have you all here. So it's Lars Hultkrantz, who is a professor of economics at Örebro University in Sweden. Tom is a really senior person in this. He's done enormous amounts of things in the infrastructure field. So I'm very happy to have you here, Lars. We have Tom Willems, who is PhD and project manager at Werkbenootschap in Belgium. And I know, Tom, you did your PhD on things really applying that we can apply here. So it's really good to have you here. And so you wrote a chapter on Belgian experiences here. Maria Bratt-Börjesson, professor at the Swedish National Road and Transport Research Institute, VTI. Maria, I'm super grateful that you could do this on such short notice. Those of you who have seen the earlier sendouts have seen that that should have been someone else here, but we talked yesterday afternoon and you were prepared to read this, and Lars said that, well, there's only one person who could do this on such short notice, and that's Maria, and I believe that as well. And then we have Mats Persson, economic policy spokesperson for the Liberal Party in Sweden. Very good to have you here, Mats. You're actually also a PhD, I should maybe add. So there will be presentations by Lars and Tom presenting their respective chapters in the book. And then there'll be comments from Maria and Mats, and then a panel discussion. And please, everyone who's watching this, you can comment and ask questions on YouTube in Swedish or English, because I'm listening, I'm following that, and I will pick out the best comments and questions and use them for the panel discussion. So with that said, let's get started, and I will leave the floor to Lars Hultkrantz to present the two chapters he's written in the book.
Thank you very much. I hope you see my pictures. I've written two chapters in this book. The first is a background on the theory, and as you could expect, there are a lot of pros and contrasts regarding public versus private engagement in building and operation of transportation infrastructure. There are of course several very good and important arguments for public control of infrastructure. I will not go through them here, but the main reason that we cannot rely only on public provision, public sector, is that private sector allows us to exploit various kind of much stronger incentives for improving efficiency and for enhancing innovation. And that's made basically through two types of mechanism: competitions for contracts and rent sharing when you have a contract that the one who is doing the work can have some benefits from doing things cheaper or with higher quality or whatever. When it comes to private money involvement, it's important to distinguish between financing or upfront private money. That's very good if you are interested in having strong incentives. It raises stakes, but there are both pros and cons. You can have detrimental effects on quality in some cases, and there are several issues related to risk. It also means that the higher stakes, the higher will the risk burden of the one who's doing the job be. So taking on risk is something you want to be compensated for. So high stakes can also involve higher finance costs. So very important is how the risk burden is shared, and whether the operator or builder can control risks, or whether they are external, whether risks are priced in an efficient way, or whether the one who's taking the risk doesn't have very much appetite for risk, and will charge a very high price for taking risk. So that's a complex set of issues related to private financing. Another issue is private funding, whether some part of whether the users of the infrastructure are paying directly through user charges, or whether the infrastructure investment is finally paid by taxes. And there are several pros and cons related to toll and other kind of user charges. It's good if you have needs for congestion charges. It's bad if user charges leads to underutilization of the capacity. But a very important aspect is that user charges, unlike financing, is a way of relieving public finances by putting more financing on users instead of taxpayers. So my conclusions in this chapter is that there actually are many different kinds of contracting alternatives for the very stages of developing infrastructure: design, building, operation, and maintenance. And there are various ways of encouraging innovation and promoting long-term or life cycle efficiency by various kind of contracts. Some may involve upfront financing, but there are also a lot of possibilities without that component. Upfront private money enhances commitment, but requires very strong ability by the procurer to manage, control, and allocate quality and risk. Private funding is interesting if there are suitable objects where tolls don't disturb the usage of the infrastructure, and in some cases it may even enhance it. And of course, in these times with very high public debt for paying for the cost of the pandemic crisis. Very strong needs for financing of investments in infrastructure and for climate policies, electrification, for instance. It may be more interesting than earlier to have a look on private funding of infrastructure. Turning to Scandinavian experiences, the most important recent ones are those that are in Norway. Norway decided in the early years of this millennium to launch 3 PPP, public-private partnership motorway links. These 3 projects were evaluated by Transportekonomiskt Institut, and basically they found that they had been a success, especially because unlike conventional contracting, these 3 objects had been able to avoid delays, and it was evaluated that this was partly because of the specific form of these PPP contracts. To be noted is that these projects are funded by tolls, but the tolls are collected by the states, and the contractors are rewarded for availability, not for usage. So the revenue risk, the usage risk is not imposed on contractors, but it is on taxpayers. Denmark also has one PPP motorway link projects in southern Jutland, but Denmark is most famous for the so-called state guarantee model, which is as the name tells, something that is basically within the public sector. It's state guaranteed, but it's separate from the public finances, and it has been used for the 3 mega big projects, Stora Bält Öresund Bridge, and is now also used for the Fehmarn Belt Bridge between Denmark and Germany. These objects are toll funded, but they are state guaranteed. There are a lot of pros and cons surrounding this model. One possible drawback is that there is a split in contracting between building and operation and management. So the link between building and long-term use is not as strong as in the Norwegian PPP projects. Sweden finally started early in 1999 with the Arlanda rail link, very long-term contract, delivery on time, but there were not much thought about how to share different kinds of risks in a proper way, and it actually turned out that the contractors had taken on a much too high risk for revenues on the revenue side. So actually the winning consortium that carried this out, they were very close to default in 2001, 2002 when the SARS pandemic led to very sharp reduction of flight passengers and the use of this link to the airport. There also has been very much discussion in the Swedish political debate, mostly concerning how the contract had handled the access of third parties like other train operators to the both the track and the platforms at Arlanda. There has been a group of motorway or bridge or tunnel road related links that have been built in recent years with contract models that resemble public-private partnerships, but they do not have the financing part included. So it's the contractors are responsible over 15 years or 20 years for not just designing and building the links, but also for operation and maintenance. And also in these cases, there are toll. They are also partly funded by tolls, but tolls are collected by the states. But pretty much like Norway, early completion or availability is rewarded in some way. And also in just a few years ago, a government committee proposed that Sweden should continue with PPP projects with the financing to learn more about how to use this. My conclusions is that I think I think I go directly to the conclusions to save time. I think it's important to evaluate the more recent Norwegian experiences, and if they seem to give a green light, I think that Sweden should continue with the PPP trials in more or less the way this government committee proposal suggested a few years ago. I also point out that there are a few cross-border projects, especially Grensebanan, Arvika-Oslo, but also in the future Helsingborg-Helsingör that seems to be very, very interesting for user charge funding. And I also point out that especially in congested metropolitan areas like the Stockholm, it could be interesting to look at some specific links, tunnel or bridge links, if they are suitable for road toll funding. For instance, the Södertörn link south of Stockholm city. So that's my very brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. And as I said earlier, you're welcome, everyone in the audience, to come with comments and questions, and I will bring them up later in the discussion afterwards. So it's over to you, Tom Willems, who wrote the next chapter in the book. Please, Tom.
Yeah, try to share my screen, but
probably Lars should take away. Lars, could you?
But maybe start with thank you for offering the opportunity to talk about the Belgian experience and talk a little bit about our chapter that I wrote together with my colleague Tim Bruinings. We both work at the Werkgenootschap, which is a public agency working for the Flemish government in order to deliver some large and complex road infrastructure projects. Maybe just to start with, the statements or the views presented in the chapter are personal views and not necessarily committing like the public agency as such. But what the chapter basically does, the PPP policymaking in Flanders, which is the northern region of Belgium. And if we start very briefly with the historical background, then we see that PPP policy was really developed in the early 2000s. And the main driving force in Flanders for PPP policy was the off-balance sheet treatment. As you probably know, Belgium is a country with a high public debt, and PPP offered an opportunity to raise the level of investments, but spreading it more in the time. So that was a main motive to start with PPPs. But also the desire to make the private sector more accountable for its results, and especially on time, on budget delivery was also a main motive. Of course, the opportunity to increase innovation efficiency by really capturing the expertise and the experience of the private sector, also delivering value for money by getting the risk allocation in an optimal manner. And of course, the life cycle approach is also already mentioned by combining the maintenance and the construction part. By connecting those two, that you get better projects. So what's maybe for an international audience quite important to state, why is it interesting to look at Flanders, a small region in Europe? I think it's interesting for an international crowd to look at those PPP projects in Flanders, because the Flemish government developed its own very specific hybrid model, which on the one hand included like the more traditional design, build, finance, maintain contract form, but also on the other hand, there was a government participation in an SPV, in a special purpose vehicle, which actually meant that the government was a minority shareholder in that SPV. And the reason to do that was there are a lot of opportunities of potential advantages, increasing the market confidence, because the government commits its own money in those projects. But also it offered like the government strategic voice, and even like a veto power in strategic crucial decision-making issues surrounding the projects. And also it opened the door to risk and benefit sharing. But of course, there are some potential drawbacks or risks. And the very typical or atypical PPP model in Flanders was led to some increased complexity on legal and governance issues, but also, and that's a very important one, at 2008-9, we experienced in Flanders that there was a stricter interpretation of Eurostat of the accounting rules, which made that some large, not all of them, but some large PPP projects in Flanders were initially classified as off balance and were then reclassified as on balance. So, and that had a major impact on how policymakers looked at PPP as a tool. In the period between 2010-2015, we saw also by the discussion with Eurostat that there was some criticism of the Court of Audit. They stated that there was too much emphasis on the budgetary motive behind PPPs. And they say it should be more than off-balance treatment, but also it was a context with the aftermath of the financial crisis, which led to fewer PPP deals. So the market context was also less interesting at that moment. And this all led to, I would say, a more cautious approach of the Flemish government. They chose for less complex and smaller PPPs, but also more the typical or traditional contract, the design, build, finance, maintain contracts, and less the participation option. And of course, more focus on operational efficiency and professionalism. And then again, an interesting turning point in how PPPs were dealt with. In 2015-16, there was an initiative from the Flemish Parliament to hold some kind of inquiry or commission on large PPP projects with hearings with several experts, academics, practitioners, and this led to a new law in 2019 on large infrastructure projects with the main goal of closely monitoring and reporting the budgetary implications of those large PPP projects. And interesting to see, for instance, is that there was the installation of some kind of cap or budgetary safeguarding ceiling to really, for future generations, to really control the budgetary implications of these large projects. And also it introduced a new system of evaluation of those projects with some kind of dashboard reporting, also readable for a larger audience, really transforming the way how to monitor these kinds of projects. That's maybe the point where the present, and that's where we are now. If we try to look at the future of PPP policy making in Flanders, then I think there are two things worth mentioning. The first thing is that in the scope of that parliamentary commission, there has been also quite interesting discussions on opportunities to verify and increase possibilities for private finance, but also, and that's what Lars also mentioned, to really explore also the opportunities of private funding. So who's actually going to pay for the projects? Is it the government through taxpayers' money, or is it the individual user of the infrastructure? And that's really uncharted territory in a way in Flanders, because most of those large projects are just funded by taxpayers' money. A second thing that I think it's interesting, because of the discussion and the reclassification by Eurostat of some projects, I think policymakers have overlooked and ignored the potential interesting elements of that participative PPPs. I think, especially in the context where we're now in, the COVID crisis, where there's a desire to use public investments to stimulate or relaunch the economy, I think there are some interesting ingredients in those participation, because you can increase, again, the interest of the private sector. It offers an opportunity or a way to align the public and private interests. But also the opportunity for benefit sharing. So if an SPV makes profit, part of that profit may flow back to the government side. But also, and I think that's an important constatation, that it may also be Eurostat proof. The manual published by the European Investment Bank in 2016 offered much needed clarification on that issue. And I think if you look at how Eurostat treats those kinds of projects, it's not, they're not averse towards participation as such, but more the issue of offering state guarantees or not. That's something that really tips or shifts the risk analysis, but participation as such can be Eurostat proof in that regard. So if I try to wrap it up. The lesson or the situation in Flanders, in Belgium, is that we saw that the new law was a very much welcomed and needed initiative, because in a way it offered a stable institutional framework to really work in the future with PPPs, to keep also the budgetary implications under control, under close watch. And that was necessary to counter the criticisms. But it offers also like a stable path for the future to really further explore the potential of PPPs. I see mainly two challenges or opportunities, and that's working further on the private funding part, like how can we explore that part any further, and also focus on maybe like a return of rediscovering the good elements in the participative PPP model, not only in Flanders, but also I think at the European level. So there are some, I think, interesting elements in that model with sort of overall goal, namely to increase the level of investments, but while staying within the strict Eurostat or European framework to keep like the budgetary implications under control. So that's, I think, hopefully within 10 minutes, a description of what's in our chapter.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's really good to have a view from several different countries here. So I'm leaving the floor now to Maria Bergström, who will comment on this. Please, Maria.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to read and comment on this little book. I read it yesterday night. And so mostly I agree with most of what's in this book. So I'll focus a little bit on maybe the things that I don't agree with, or I think could be discussed at least. I will not go so much into the issue of contract design, although this is obviously extremely important and also very complex. It was rewarded the Nobel Prize a few years ago, so that's very complicated. But that is, it can't be understated how important it is when you do this. So what I think, maybe it's there in the book, but I think it could have been a little more clear, is why you have public-private partnerships. So in the beginning, you think about the situation in the United States, where there literally is very little money for investment in infrastructure. They invest, or they fund infrastructure with fuel taxes, and fuel taxes hasn't been raised since in the beginning of the 90s, so they really needed capital to do investments with. So that basically come from there. When you think about the European case, or at least the Scandinavian case, that's not really the issue. There's a lot of public money for infrastructure investments, and there's actually not a lot to suggest, no evidence really, that we invest too little in infrastructure or maintenance. I'm not so sure. So then the argument is a little bit different. I'm not sure about the Belgian situation in this respect. The report claims, and also we saw in the presentation just earlier, that more money is needed, says needed, for social reasons. So I was wondering, is this true, or maybe it has to do with priorities? Because we know for a fact that public decision makers are not that good at selecting projects, or selecting the projects that give high value for money. And if you don't manage to select right projects, then that is a key issue rather than more money. So that's something that maybe could have been, it's there in the report, but it could have been a little bit more clearly written. Then there is this other argument that has to do with increased efficiency. And here's where contract design obviously is very important. And I agree with basically everything that's in the report on this, that there are large problems with cost overruns, and increasing costs everywhere, and prices in the construction sector increases a lot faster than prices in other sectors. So something has to be done, and maybe this is a good idea. So I support Lars' conclusions, and also, yeah, they're conclusion in the report that this is good. But you have to be aware then that if you let some private sector take some risk, they will have to be paid for it. So in that sense, it can be more expensive also for the taxpayers. So it comes with the cost too. So in the introduction, there's also sort of a hint that the real gain from public-private partnerships could be that actually the private sector takes part in the project selection, so that actually the project is realized that give high value for money for the public. And that, I think, could be very good. We haven't seen a lot of that. Maybe a little bit, you can see when projects are funded by user charges, like the Öresund Bridge, for instance, and Norwegian projects, if that's actually paid by user charges. And then I think that maybe that could be very good. I start to think that maybe it is good to make sure that we actually invest in projects with high value for money, which the public decision makers, politicians, doesn't really seem to be able to do. And we know we have such as regional lobbying and vested interests, and you have this feature, I think it's in the report, that you have a few people gain a lot from an infrastructure investment and a lot of people pay a little if it's taxpayers. So this is actually very important. When you discuss cost overruns in the report, I think it's chapter 4, I think it's from the decision to build the investment, or even since the project is procured. But you also see a large cost increase from the time when the project is first sort of discussed until the contract is designed. And the some Norwegian authors have written about this. And you can see, for instance, the Swedish high-speed rail, an example of that. When the idea was just starting to float around, it would cost 50 billion kroner, and now it's several hundreds of billion kroner. So that's also something maybe that the private sector could help doing, but then they have to take some risk and they have to be part of the project selection. Then in the introduction, there are some sentences that I have to sort of discuss. It says that infrastructure investments, I think it's the first sentence in the book, infrastructure investments are important at any time, but now it's more important than ever. And almost everyone agrees that we need more public investments in and spending on maintenance on the EU level and in Scandinavia too. And I would like to actually question that among transport economists, that view is sort of not that obvious. It's more about what I just said, that maybe the project selection we need to put more focus on that, so that the value for money is actually as high as it could be. And also there's some conclusion that the COVID crisis had made this even more important, both that we need more money and that we need to start these projects early, as soon as possible. And I think that deserves some discussion too, because the COVID crisis seemed to have, so then it's more into the macroeconomic arguments that you have slack in the economy, you have unemployed construction workers and builders. I think in this crisis, it seems to me that it's more people in the service sector, in the tourist sector that are employed. So it's not obvious to me that infrastructure is where public spending should actually be increased. And I think at least that should deserve some more discussion on why this is relevant in the COVID crisis, where clearly public money is needed in other sectors as well, possibly even more important in other sectors. So there's a little bit of macroeconomic arguments and microeconomic arguments, and maybe they could have been more streamlined, a little bit clearer. Then when we finally coming to user charges, and I agree with in chapter 2, almost everything that Lars has written, I agree with, but also I think maybe more of user charges could be good, because also taxpayers' money has marginal cost. It's costly. It takes resources from other sectors or increases taxes, which causes deadweight losses in the economy. And also, if you have, as I said earlier, user charges, you maybe get some help with project selection to make sure that you only realize projects that actually there's a demand for in the public. So maybe the Norwegians are right in that maybe it's good, maybe there's something we should try in other countries too. And I would like to finish with just this. It's in the report, but I think we have to be repeated a lot that even if it's public money, someone has to pay. And the cost for infrastructure has increased a lot. The prices increases faster in other sectors. And so even no matter who pays for it, someone has to pay, and it's not for free. And that's something that you have to bear in mind, particularly when it comes to accountability. Since transportation infrastructure projects are so long-term, it's very difficult to make the decision makers responsible because it's so long ago. So that demands even higher. It's even more important that when you somehow involve public money, that someone can, it's good value for money, because in the long run that would benefit everyone. I think I'm done. Thank you very much, Maria. So for the last comments before the discussion, we have Mats Persson from the Liberal Party. Please, Mats. You're muted, Mats.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment on this this book. I really liked it a lot. I think it was it's a really good report. Let me start by taking the political perspective and the political debate in the specific in Swedish context related to the book. So the first thing I think this book shows, and I think that's really important, is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. There has been a debate in Sweden, for example, regarding the high-speed train system, that you could use the public-private partner model to the PPP to finance it, and that it could be a way to allow, in order to avoid increases in public debt, you could use the PPP. The new European rules, which is stated in the book, says that that's not possible anymore, and I think that's a really good thing. Those countries during the financial crisis 2008 that implemented creative accounting in terms of infrastructure, that has implied that the European Union nowadays doesn't allow that, and I think that's a good thing, because there is no such thing as a free lunch. You can't just build a high-speed train system assuming that the taxpayers doesn't have to pay it in the long run anyway. Given that there is no such thing as a free lunch, I think this book also shows the importance of cost-benefit analysis. I mean, you can't always get what you want, and projects with small benefits in relation to the cost should not be prioritized by politicians. And I think the Corona crisis doesn't change that fact, because infrastructure is a pretty bad way in order to reduce the business cycle. Infrastructure could be important in order to increase the productivity in the economy, but it's not the best, most efficient way in order to reduce the business cycle. And I think one indication of that is that now when we increase the Swedish money increase, in Swedish politics we increase the money to maintenance, it's still not that much money, because it takes too long time to get the money out to the infrastructure system. So my first comment is there is no such thing as a free lunch, and that's important. That's, I think, some of those who have argued pro PPP have to take that into account. The second thing is that those systematic cost overruns in infrastructure projects, we have to deal with that. That's a big problem, and I think that PPP could be a way to deal with that. And the last 10 years, there have been some in the debate. There is those criticizing public-private partnership in view of that private contractors having higher cost of borrowing than the government. I mean, that's a fact. Of course, that's the case. But I think that's the wrong perspective. There is efficiency gains in terms of stronger incentives when you have the private sector involved. And I think one indication of that is that we have airports, we have electronic communication networks, we have ports where, I mean, that's infrastructure where the private operators have a much higher role, much more important role than in terms of, for example, building railway. So I think this is an argument that we need to think in a different way. And I think that PPP is one way forward in that sense. What can we say about the future given this book? I think one of the most important thing, and I live in Skåne, so maybe I'm a bit, the Öresund Bridge, I think is a good example. I think, and I think that's something that could be elaborated a bit more in the report. I think that we need to discuss and need to find those infrastructure objects where you have a cash flow. The Öresund Bridge is an obvious example. I mean, you build a bridge and you have a natural cash flow from the users. And I think maybe, but I think that could be elaborated in the book to a higher extent. I mean, in what situations do we have a cash flow? In which situations do we really have is it really possible for the private actor to be involved and to take a greater responsibility? Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think there is a possibility is the new technology in terms of where you can use track use chargers can be a way forward in this respect. Another good thing about the book, I think, is that we really need to learn from other countries. And I think that, I mean, the Swedish perspective, you can just go to Denmark, you can just go to Norway, and for example, Belgium, you can see that there is happening a lot in this field. And I think the Swedish debate, political debate is we need to take the next step, and we need to really discuss how should the relation between the public and private sector look like, and in what kind of situations do we have a good cash flow for a private actor to be really involved. I agree with Maria that I think that the Corona crisis, it could be an argument for more infrastructure, but it's not obvious for me. But I think an argument for good infrastructure investments, it's the importance of reducing climate change. And I think that electrification of roads is a really important issue. And I think that it's a new technology. And I think that the private sector should and could be involved in this framework building or electrificate our roads for cars in general, but also for trucks and that's important given that we want to reduce climate change in Sweden. Finally, I would like to say that I think this is a really, really good book. I think that the political debate in Sweden need to take the next step. We have to look more what was happening in other countries. We need to really focus and discuss the possibility to use the private contractors, and also define what kind of infrastructure objects where there is a cash flow, where it is possible for private actors to be more involved. And I think that's the next step for the political debate in Sweden in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's time then for a panel discussion, and I hope we can get all of us on screen at the same time here. I should maybe start with just, since it was actually me who wrote the introduction, I should say, yes, Maria, you're right. It says almost everyone agrees that we should spend more on this, but in the next paragraph, I write that this is highly debatable, even though a lot of people seem to agree that we should spend more on this. Just as you say, just as Mats says, it's really debatable if you can make a connection between COVID and infrastructure investments, because the investments often come much later than we would want them to in order to stimulate the economy at the moment. So I totally agree with you there. The problem is that maybe a lot of politicians and the EU Commission probably do not agree with you. But I think there are several interesting things raised here. I also have a couple of comments and questions from the audience. I think we should start with just maybe trying to explain and talk about the pros and cons of where the financing is, because some of the things we've talked about here has all the financing on the private party, and then they get paid afterwards, like for several decades. And in some cases, the construction company gets paid while they build, and then they get paid just for the maintenance in the long perspective. And then you have models in between, like in Norway, you get some of the payment when you build the project, and then you get some of the payment during the maintenance phase. So there's like a possibility of a whole spectrum here, from 100% private financing and 100% public financing. Is there a reason to, like, where should we be here? Are there any pros and cons? Are there any rules of thumbs wherever we should take this? Anyone who wants to start with this? Could I get something from Lars here, for example?
Yeah, I just one thought. I would like to emphasize one of Maria's point that perhaps the most interesting phase is not building and operation and maintenance, but design, because that's where we have the largest part of cost overruns, and actually if you look on the motorway link projects in Sweden and Norway, that they have not focused on private participation in that phase, but there are a lot of good experiences from the Danish bridge links, where they have had contracting forms that have left much space to innovation from private builders. And also I would say that even the Arlanda rail link can be criticized for many reasons. One of the big successes of that was actually design. We had not gotten the design of the stations at the airport if this had been contracted in a conventional way. So I think the long-term perspective is, of course, needed to emphasize, but that doesn't require that operators, contractors bear total all risk, revenue risk. It can be done like in Sweden and Norway, but some kind of rent sharing in the design phase may be important to have a look on. On the other hand, we have had the catastrophe Nya Karolinska hospital, where maybe we have some negative experiences from involving too much private interest in the design phase. So, but that's needed to be looked on.
Thank you. Tom, if I understood it correctly, Tom, in Belgium, in Flanders, there have been projects where the construction companies have been involved already in the design phase. So they're early on in the project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it depends on the case. It's not, it's really case dependent in which way there's like room for the private sector or companies to really be involved from the start. So I think I was following up a little bit on the comment of Lars. I think like the key or one potential key in successful PPPs is finding or I saw some kind of intelligent standardization. I think, and it contradicts a little bit because the advantage of standardization and using like a standard contract has some advantages because it prohibits that you find every time or has to reinvent the wheel each time again. So when something works, you can like use it in a structural manner. But like the problem with standardization and standard contracts and using one model that one size fits it all is that it offers little or no room for innovation and new ideas, new things. So I think that's a very delicate balance that you have to, of course, learn from the past and use some kind of standardization because it's a professional way to do things, but also find in some cases, if there's a case to open it up a little bit more, to really use the creativity and the expertise of the private sector from early on, then there should be room enough to do that. So I think it's a quite difficult challenge, I think, because it's in a way case dependent and sector dependent, because in some policy sectors, there's maybe little room for the real creativity or innovation of the private sector. But I think in some cases, there should be.
Really interesting, an interesting balance there. Anyone else wants to comment on this? Otherwise, I would like to talk about a bit. There's like a monopoly effect. Once someone has won the contract, it means that this construction company now has a monopoly on this road or railroad or whatever for a long time. And that means you can have a problem if you want to change anything in the design, etc. You see that you have other needs than you expected from the beginning. Then you only have one party to negotiate with because there is a monopoly. Is this like a common problem? How can it be handled? I've read about examples where things become much more expensive because, yeah, sure, you have a contract with a fixed cost, but then in the end you do some changes and then it actually becomes extremely expensive because you only have one party to negotiate with. Do you have any comments on this, how it can be handled? I don't see any hands here.
It is a very important problem because there always are negotiations. These negotiations always drive cost in increases for exactly the reasons. This is something that is. This is one of the arguments to have to not have to pay the contractor immediately after everything is delivered, but be able to have options for further payments and businesses, but they depend on good behavior in the early stages of the contract performances. So this is an important issue, and there are several ways to deal with it. Of course, if you contract operation and maintenance separately, you have a new competition, but it's a trade-off with having the goods of thinking about the long term already in the construction and design phase. It's important. It's complicated.
I have a question from Mr. Hans Kruse in the audience. Are there any experiences of PPP projects in city environments like trams or subways, etc.? Because what we've been talking about here is like railroads and bridges. Are there good examples in city environments? No?
Yeah,
Nothing
I think
yeah.
there are in Flanders a couple of tram projects which also were delivered through the hybrid model, which on the one hand used the design, build, finance, maintain framework, but also included a participation of the tramway operator in Flanders. So there has been experiments or projects which were realized at in the past in Flanders. But again, there's with how the tramway operates in Flanders, there's again a lot to say about the private funding of the projects. It's not really that with the sale of the tickets from the tram that the whole project is funded. No, it's like for 80% taxpayers' money, and then a little bit of the fee comes from the sale of the tickets. So again, you have this huge gap between what the government has to pay for it and what individuals have to pay for it. So the business case or the cost benefit analysis, which Mats mentioned, is not really optimal, I would say, in those cases.
Thank you.
In Sweden, you have the Arlanda-bana, which is partly a city environment, obviously.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, actually, it's 1 o'clock now, and I guess most of our audience are listening to us during their lunch and should probably get back to their other Zoom meetings or whatever. Thank you very much, all of you, for participating. And I really hope this can be the start of a new discussion on this in Sweden, because it's really needed. And thank you especially to Tom and Lars for writing the book. And well, really happy to have you here. And well, I hope I'll see you some other time and talk more about those things. And thank you to everyone in the audience who have been listening and active on YouTube. So thank you and goodbye for now.